Now, the laws around owning exotic pets need a radical overhaul to stop animals being driven towards extinction in the wild. That's according to a new report. Born Free Foundation and the RSPCA are now on board to try and prevent this from happening. Dr. Jones joins us right now, and he works with the Born Free Foundation.
Mark Jones. Mark, let's just clarify our terms here, because when we talk about these sort of exotic pets, are we talking reptiles, are we talking birds? What sort of things are we talking about?
The keeping of exotic pets in the UK involves millions of animals belonging to a vast range of species, all kinds of different species, from reptiles to amphibians to birds and to ornamental fish as well. But the true scale and scope of the trade is pretty poorly understood, because for the vast majority of our kept animals here in the UK, there is no licensing or registration requirement. So we don't really know for sure what's out there. What we do know is this is now a global problem, that the scale of exotic pet trade and keeping has escalated massively since the 1950s, and that there are dire consequences, not just for the welfare of individual animals caught up in the trade, but also for species conservation and human and animal health, and potentially for the wider environment.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you were very concerned about, of course, and the RSPCA, is that, as you just mentioned there, that because of a lack of knowledge of resources, you know, people are keeping these animals, they're often depriving their pets, I mean, not necessarily on purpose, but of at least one of their basic requirements. I mean, these are exotic animals.
Precisely. I mean, the needs of many species kept as exotic pets aren't really well understood by science, let alone traders and keepers. And as a consequence, it's really difficult to ensure these animals are adequately provided for. And we fear that many exotic pets are commonly deprived of even their basic welfare requirements, like a suitable environment, a suitable diet, the ability to exhibit their normal behaviours, their social needs, which are often very, very complex and poorly understood, and of course freedom from pain, injury and disease. And as a result, many exotic pets suffer in trade and in captivity when they're in people's homes.
And obviously there are issues with not knowing necessarily what the right diet is, and often not giving these animals the right amount of space.
Exactly. I mean, for many species, the mortality rates during collection and production and transport and at their ultimate destination are very high. In reptiles, we see a lot of nutritional deficiencies causing problems with their skin and their bones and other issues. Cage birds, like parrots, commonly suffer behavioural disorders like feather plucking and self-harming. And highly social species like primates, when they're kept alone, which they often are when they're kept as pets, suffer massive psychological distress and psychological problems. And we have to remember that many of these species have evolved to hide injury or illness to make them less of an easy target in the wild. So by the time owners realise there's a problem, it's often already very advanced.
I was just going to mention about owners. I mean, what advice would you give to owners who perhaps are watching this now or seeing the campaign and the awareness, quite rightly, that that's going to give people, that there are concerns about the fact that they might not be giving their pet, their exotic pet, that they, you know, might have in their possession for the, you know, no bad reason. We can't say that it's all, they know where they've come from, if you know what I mean. But what would you say to those people who may be concerned they're doing the right thing?
Well, we urge people to think really carefully about the choices they make when they're considering buying a pet. And while some exotic pets are clearly potentially dangerous and very difficult to keep, like big cats or constrictor snakes or venomous species, buying a small animal to have in the house, perhaps for a child, might seem harmless enough. It may even seem like a less complicated option than, say, a dog or a cat, which is going to need a lot of time and attention. However, the welfare implications for the animal concerned and the wider implications for conservation and human, animal and environmental health and safety can be very serious. These animals are often sold without much information on how they should be kept, and the consequences can be felt far away, often in distant parts of the world where these animals may be under serious threat in the wild. So we'd really urge people to think very, very carefully, do their research very thoroughly, and preferably consider rescuing a domestic animal in need of a home instead of buying an exotic pet.
Yeah, I was just looking at the list, and terrapins and clownfish as well. We were showing pictures of clownfish a short time ago. You must dread it when every time Finding Nemo comes on television, because it's pressure from youngsters, isn't it, who are getting parents to take that risk, actually, and buy pets that perhaps they don't know enough about.
It is indeed, and obviously the depiction of different types of animals in the media creates that interest and sometimes creates that demand. You know, people perhaps don't think or don't realise what the consequences are of feeding that demand by going out and perhaps trying to buy a particular type of animal to, you know, to satisfy a child's desire for it, or something like that. So we do see a big spike in demand in certain species after they've been depicted in films or on television, and that can create real problems. Clownfish of the type that Nemo was have come under huge pressure because of collection for the exotic pet trade in different parts of the world where they live. The Finding Nemo films has almost certainly had some part to play in creating that kind of demand.
Sad, isn't it?
Mark, the message presumably is, if you're thinking about a pet, go to a recognised pet store and work from a list of established animals that we know what we're talking about.
Well, it's currently legal in the UK to keep almost any animals as a pet, and only a few species require a licence, such as, you know, those species which are considered to be highly dangerous. Yeah. But we believe that current UK legislation relating to exotic pets is piecemeal, reactionary, and it's really unable to keep up with emerging animal welfare and conservation science. So we're urging the UK government to undertake a comprehensive review of the trade, and to give due consideration for systems that are being put in place, so-called positive lists in some other countries, where pets are only allowed to be sold if the species that they belong to satisfy certain criteria, like that their welfare needs can be met and that the trade doesn't affect the conservation of those species.